Hi, hello, welcome back. It's me, Devraj. This is Mysticism in the Body. I'm back looking at the Zohar. And this is episode 5 in our series. Let's have a recap about what we've seen so far. We started with this line from Isaiah 40:26. Lift your eyes on high and see who created these. And then, we learned that this word who, when directed internally, directs us back to a deep place within us, the beginning of all kind of thinking in Binah, if you're into the tree of life, third Sephirah. So if you really investigate your sense of personal identity enough, you get back to Binah. And if you get back there, then the word what becomes highly significant. What is then used to create. And so these two words kind of define the limits of heaven, so to speak. Who is the end of heaven above, and what, that which is created, Elo, in Hebrew, the end of heaven below, Malkut, so Binah to Malkut. With a bit of an intimation, I think, with the word what, which is Ma, that it relates to Hokmah. And Hok, I think, means power, so power to create is Hokmah, as I understand it. And then we came to this idea of what can be a witness to you. We also have this notion of a ladder moving internally, and I kind of made an analogy to the ladder of the Western mystery tradition, often seen, 111, 222, 333 in its relationship to 37, Yakidah. But really, you could also, I didn't think of it at the time, which feels a bit dumb, but you could also use the ladder from Jewish mysticism. The idea of the 5 sheaves around the soul, around the most central self, which are Nipesh, like the animal soul, Ruach, the intellect, Neshama, which is more like a Binah consciousness, where you're really at the highest level of differentiated thought, the kind of mind of God. And then Chaya, which is the next sheaf back, which is Hokmah consciousness, undifferentiated thought. And finally Yakidah, which is higher still. So this is the ladder that we've got inside that we can travel back from to get to this place where the word who can take us back down the ladder. So Rabbi Elazar had been talking, and then Rabbi Shimon asked him to be quiet. And then Rabbi Shimon continued explaining that one time the prophet Elijah had come and visited him when he was on the seashore, a place of meeting between land and sea, which probably is, if you're familiar with Kabbalistic stuff, I guess it's the meeting between Briah and Yetzirah. So you have this idea, place where the divine realm can touch the physical realm. And then Elijah explained to Rabbi Shimon about this process of creation that's being alluded to by this verse from Isaiah. And he's saying it was explained to him in the academy on high, this idea like the secret university, the invisible university, the invisible college. And when Ein Sof or Keter desired to be revealed, it wanted to be revealed, it wanted to be named. So what happened was it created a single point, which became a thought, and then inside that thought it engraved itself. It created what the text calls a deep structure, otherwise known as a deep object. So this is a bit like, the idea of a book that you have not yet written, it's just sitting in your mind. Also a little bit like a zip file, perhaps, like in the old days you used to get a zip file through the email, and it would try and convince you to click on it, and if you did, some hideous program would be written inside your laptop, and no doubt some dodgy characters would try to nick your credit card details. So this is where we've been so far, and then we came to this idea now that LA, these, which is the world around us, has been created, that there are kind of 2 types of people. Based on this mystery, those who sinned with the golden calf, which I think is to do with Mount Sinai, and the people who didn't wait for Moses to come down but just kind of started worshipping idols. They see the world around them, the world around us, as just a material phenomena. And they say, these are your gods. But the text explains, just as the word me is combined with ele to create Elohim, a kind of God, a kind of creative entity, so the name Elohim is constantly polysemous. So I think that means it's everywhere. So the name of God is actually everywhere. And through this mystery, the universe exists. Then Elijah flew off. So the end of Rabbi Shimon explaining to Rabbi Elazar these things came to an end. So we can continue now. Rabbi Elazar and all the companions came and bowed down in front of him. Weeping, they said, "If we have come into the world only to hear this, it is enough." So this deep weeping, is important. One, it is, it's just what it is. The Elazar and the companions are weeping at the profundity of his teaching, but it's also pointing. It's like an arrow. It's saying, there's something here that's really, really important. And as I mentioned before, the whole thing with the Zohar and with any kind of deeply mystical text really is that it's all about digging into it. We're brought up in this kind of Western society where it's all about goals, getting to the attainment, and that's a useful kind of drive. But actually the mystical state comes from repeatedly digging into the text with the intention to understand what it's saying. And so, this whole passage where Shimon has started by saying, what is the kind of order of creation, and that there is this kind of discrepancy or there's this separation between things revealed and things not revealed. And then he relates about how Elijah comes to him and explains this, as we've just seen, gives this process of creation. And it's saying there's really important stuff here, very deep stuff. And, one of the things you can see here is this idea that the kind of order of creation, you've got Ein Sof desiring to be named, desiring to be witnessed, to be seen, creating this single point, Hokmah, and you have to be a little bit careful about making too harder kind of categories for the tree, because the tree is well known, but all the Sephirah look the same, but they're kind of, they're not also kind of firm, fixed, manifest kind of concepts. And then the kind of world is created, and then it seems like Elohim is created after that, because this question, who, me, needs to bind to LA, the revealed world. So this is pretty radical, if you look at the way that Christianity, because this is all about the opening line of Genesis, if you look at the way that Christianity interprets this line, it's like, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But this seems to be saying something different. It's saying that, God, Elohim, didn't rock up until a little bit later on. So this is stuff that you can dig into in your own mind, read through, try to get a handle on what's being said. Okay, so let's continue along with the text. Rabbi Shimon said, "So the heavens and their array were created by Ma, what, as is written, when I behold your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars that you set in place, Ma, how majestic is your name throughout the earth." Once again, this idea of a name is the name of the Creator is there throughout the earth, almost like a kind of brand name. Your splendor is celebrated above heaven, from Psalms 8:4. Above heaven to attain the name. For it created a light for its light, one enclosed in the other, and it attained a high name. So it's, we're going back to this primal impulse from within, the unmanifest, Ein Sof, to manifest itself, to get a name. It's clothing itself, making itself visible and gaining a name. And something to understand here, in this process, it's like, when I used to read spiritual stuff when I was a bit younger, it seemed to be all happening in an abstract world, either at the kind of beginning of time, as I envisaged it a long time ago, like a sort of big bang in the past. But now when I read this, it seems much clearer to me that this is going on now. This is going on now. This is happening right now. It's ongoing. Let's continue. So in the beginning, Elohim created, as in Genesis 1:1. So Elohim created, Elohim above. For Ma was not so, is not composed until these letters, LA, are drawn from above to below, and mother lends daughter her garments. So here we have the idea that, Bina, founded with this word hu, gives birth to a daughter, Malkut, and Malkut is garbed in her garments. But then it says, though not adorning her with her adornments. So the mother lends the daughter her garments, but not her adornments. This is like a classic bit of sort of Zohar, I think, where, it really avoids, I think, the bits I've seen using technical Kabbalistic language. It just doesn't want to do that. And so it far prefers to use sort of analogies from just normal day-to-day relationships and life, basically. So what this is saying, essentially, I think, is that the daughter, which is the world around us, is clothed in garments, the mother's garments. It's visible, we can experience the world around us, but we don't see the adornments because we don't yet see the divine name, the divine presence in everything around us. And then the text continues, when does she adorn her fittingly? When all males appear before her, as is written, all your males shall appear before the sovereign, Yahweh. So, what it's saying is, I think, is very similar to this split up here about the golden calf. Some people look at the physical world and say it's just material, it's just physicality, and God is off in some abstract domain somewhere, maybe still about, maybe not. And then you've got the other people who see the name of God in everything around them. And so those people who just see it as material, they're like, they see the daughter in the mother's garments, but not the daughter in the mother's adornments. Hopefully that makes sense. They don't see the word of God written, they don't see the word of the Creator, Elohim, written inside the world, written in the world. But when all males appear before her, before the sovereign, this one is called sovereign, as is said, behold the ark of the covenant, sovereign of all the earth. And then at that point, when the divine name is recognized, when we see the Creator, God, if you wish, in the world around us, in each moment, in each aspect of the world, in each appearance, then we're seeing the daughter with the mother's adornments. Hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully it's right. Hopefully it's a correct interpretation. That's how I'm reading it at the moment. And then it continues. Then the letter Hey departs and Yod enters. Hey is to do with sight. And she adorns herself in masculine clothing in the presence of every male in Israel. So, I think this is to do with, the masculine kind of Hey aspect of consciousness. Witnessing the Creator God in everything around him. Other letters Israel draws from above to this sight, LA. These I remember. These I remember. So this remembering is kind of interesting to me. This sense perhaps as you start to see, Elohim, the divine name in everything around you, you start to remember, this thing that was desired to be witnessed all the way back up here. What can I take as a witness to you? Perhaps it's relating to that. With my mouth I mentioned them, in my yearning I poured out my tears, drawing forth these letters. Again, I think this is to do with the creative process, in Jewish Kabbalah, as I understand it, creation is much like speaking from the mouth of the Creator. Kind of tracks back to this word abracadabra, sort of a kid's magic word that you have, but which in Hebrew actually means, as I speak, I create. Or I create as I speak. So this idea that the act of creation, going on all the time and surrounding us all the time, is the Creator speaking, and the Hebrew language are the kind of building blocks of this creation. So as I understand it, this idea between the relation, the Hebrew language literally is the building blocks of creation, that the world is spoken in it. Well, it's spoken. It's analogous to being spoken into existence. And this here is a kind of very emotional act. In my yearning I poured out my tears, drawing forth these letters. Then I conduct them from above to the house of Elohim, to be Elohim like him. With what? With joyous shouts of praise, the festive throng. So I'm not sure what that reference is, but again, it's like this putting out creation, creating almost for yourself a kind of separated world, almost so that you can can reconnect with it, reconnect with yourself in so doing. Text continues, Rabbi Elazar said, my silence assembled a temple above, a temple below. Indeed, a word is worth one coin, silence two. So I think this is going back to, where Rabbi Shimon had said, Elazar, my son, cease your words, so that the concealed mystery on high, unknown to any human, may be revealed. That this, this primal creative act requires silence. Silence is kind of probably analogous to like Chokmah consciousness. So the word that he's speaking is like Binah consciousness. And then in order for it to manifest both above and below, in heaven and in earth, there needs to be this presence of this silence. A word is worth one coin, what I said, the meaning I aroused. Silence too. By holding my silence, two worlds were created, erected as one. Okay, so that's about as far as I feel confident to go today. I hope you found this useful. We can continue along. I'm going to have really look into the next passage, quite a long passage after this, and try to really get some good insights, get my head around it. And something that strikes me now, like a few weeks into this Zohar and myself really trying to study this text and feel like I'm getting, insights kind of prompted into me somehow. It's like, like at the moment there's a lot of talk has been in the media about UFOs, and like I sort of think, well, how radical would it be if suddenly over the world's media it was announced that like there's all these UFOs around and aliens and stuff. But in a sense what's being spoken about here is a great deal weirder. I've been brought up in a very rational kind of world, where everything was to do with science, everything was to do with the individual and the world. There's been this immense formatting that has gone on from my culture into me, and the world that this is proposing here in the Zohar, in these passages, is way more radical in many ways than a bunch of aliens walking around suddenly saying we've been watching you for a while or something. It's like, it's interesting to reflect on. It's interesting to reflect on just how kind of radical this stuff is. If this is how reality actually is, that it's being created behind the scenes by a higher version of ourselves, essentially, that we can go back to and access. When you read accounts of like, the Sefer Yetzirah being used to make golems, artificial creatures and stuff, what essentially it's really talking about, I think, is, using this word who or whatever, meditation, to go back to like Yekidah, to the highest rung on the ladder, up there, Binah and Chokmah, and then creating stuff. Existence isn't really set in stone until it comes out from Binah. So this is seriously, to my mind anyway, this is seriously radical stuff that this text is talking about. Okay, cool. Thank you for tuning in. If you're interested in any of my books or other stuff that I'm up to, just put my name, Devaraj Sandberg, into Google. Not many of those around, and you'll find me pretty quick. Okay, great. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you again shortly. Some more mysticism in the body, some more Zohar study.